Hello, welcome back to the Fruit of Grisaia. We have to talk about something sensitive with Amane. Great about that. Okay, let me think about how I want to say this.
何よ、難しい話なの?
Yeah, pretty awkward.
あんたの仕事の話? それなら私は別に。
No, it's not my job, it's about you, Amane.
私の? 何?
Amane, let me ask you something. Please, hear me out before you take offense. Does the nickname Cockroach mean anything to you?
毒虫?
Right, ring any bells?
誰に聞いたの?
At the festival today, I happened to overhear two girls talking. Got the idea they were probably old acquaintances of yours.
そう.
Am I right to think that word has something to do with your past? Well, don't get me wrong. I'm not going to drag anything out of you. It's just, I don't know. If your memories are still causing you some worry or pain, I'd want to do anything I can to help. That's all. Of course, your past is your own business. If you tell me to leave it alone and never bring it up again, I'll accept that and abide by it. You did the same for me after all. But if, by some chance, you need to get something off your chest, I'll listen. I'll help you any way I can. What I can do for you probably doesn't amount to much, granted, but I don't have anything else to offer. Tell me, Amane, what should I do? Should I pretend I didn't hear anything and forget about this? Or is there some way I can help you? I can't figure this out alone. Amane.
そっか、知られちゃったか。じゃあ仕方がないよね。
Amane.
私立滝園学園1年 A 組バスケ部所属風見和樹。もちろん知ってるよね。あの時8月14日バスケットボール部の夏合宿の帰り道、彼女を含む14人を乗せたマイクロバスは忽然と姿を消した。世に言う滝園学園マイクロバス転落事故。私はその14人の中の唯一の生き残りよ。
Are you serious?
こんなことで嘘は言わないよ。
My older sister, Kazami Kazuki, when she disappeared, it destroyed my family. And the one girl who lived through that disaster was Amane? That's your past?
そう、私はユージのお姉さんと同級生だった。
Why didn't you?
ごめん、言えなかったんだよ。ユージが転入してきた時、風見ユージって名前を聞いた時、すぐに気がついたんだけど言えなかった。
Well, of course she couldn't. I'm the family Kazuki left behind. Yeah, Kazuki. It must have been a complete bombshell. There's no way you'd be able to figure out a situation like that on the spur of the moment. I see. Yeah, makes sense.
あの時のことはユージも知ってるよね。
Yeah, the general picture at least. August 14th. Years and years ago, on the way back from a training camp, the Takizono Academy basketball team's school bus plunged off a cliff. An extensive search was abandoned in failure 14 days after the girls disappeared. But in the end, a single survivor managed to find her own way to safety. It was a widely reported incident at the time. It's hard to believe that was Amane. That lone survivor was a major focus of media attention for some time after the fact. Speculation gave rise to rumors. Many outlets questioned the means by which that single girl had survived the cruel ordeal that claimed the lives of her classmates. In mass media, extreme and shocking news sells. The lone survivor was subjected to vicious gossip on television and in print. They had stopped short of publishing her name, probably out of legal concerns rather than ethical ones. Television shows exploited footage of the weeping families as a backdrop for lurid gossip about the deaths of their children. Tabloid magazines published vivid, unsourced descriptions of hellish conditions, using loaded questions and innuendo to suggest the girl had survived only by becoming something less than human. Among these, some articles even discussed the interpersonal dynamics of the Doom team and their relationships. And you're that lone survivor.
急な告白でびっくりしていると思うし、私が何を言ってもずる賢く生き残った女狐の言い訳にしか聞こえないと思う。ちょっと待ってもらえる？ユージに見せたいものがあるから。
What? Amane leaves my room and 10 long minutes crawl by before she returns. I spend every moment trying to piece together my scrambled thoughts. What the is this? When I arrived at Miyama, Amane had already been here for a good year. Of course, Principal Tachibana must have known everything. She knew about all this and didn't say a word, just left me and Amane to sort it out for ourselves. I know she has that non-interference policy, but this feels more like negligence. And there's Sakaki too. She's looked into all of our backgrounds. She obviously knew the facts, and she didn't say anything. Hold on, calm down. Consider this from their perspective. What would I have done in their shoes? Yeah, I don't think I could have acted differently. It's too sensitive a problem. The two of us are the only ones who can resolve it. They weren't wrong to act as they did. And if I was in Amane's shoes? If a relative of the classmate who died while I lived transferred into my school, could I have told the truth in that moment straight out? I really don't think so. Had I been in Amane's position, I would have waited, slowly steeled my resolve, tried to find the right moment to confess the truth. That's right. I don't have the right to blame Amane. I would have made the same decision myself. And to tell the truth now, after everything that's happened between us, must have taken an incredible amount of courage on her part. She's downright admirable. Rather than thinking about whether I can blame her, maybe I should be taking a look at myself. Did I just shatter Amane's peace of mind out of nothing more than hypocritical curiosity? I'm...
ごめん、お待たせ。これを見て。
Amane holds out a beaten up old notebook toward me. The date's written on the cover, a few months of that summer. This is your...
あの日の日記帳だよ。そこに全てのことが書いてある。
Are you sure about this?
ユージにはそれを読む権利があると思うから。
Alright, I'll read it.
その日記帳の18ページ目からがあの遭難事故の直後に書かれた日記に該当するわ。
That summer, August 14th, I lower my gaze to the diary. Its pages well worn from Amane's hands. She's clearly reread it many, many times. The contents of those pages left me staggered. Okay, here we go. When I opened my eyes, I was in darkness. I couldn't see a thing. I blinked repeatedly and slowly counted to 10, but that didn't change. I couldn't even tell if my surroundings were really dark or if my eyes weren't working. In the blackness, so deep I couldn't see the palm of my hand in front of my face, I heard moaning voices from all around me. Painful, hacking coughs, screams of agony, my ears at least were functional. As I repeated quiet, calming breaths, the scent of gasoline tickled my nose, and with that stimulation the haze of confusion lifted slightly. And I remembered that I was inside a bus. Groping around my surroundings, I vaguely realized that I was lying on top of something soft. When I tried to sit up, I hit my head sharply against a seat. I reached up to my eyes to check if my glasses had been knocked crooked, only to discover that they weren't on my face in the first place. I groped around the area frantically. Again, my hand found something strangely soft and warm. It was the heat of a living thing. Realizing with a start that I was touching another person, I reflexively jerked my hand back.
気がついた？動けるようなら私の上から降りてほしいのだけれど。ごめんなさい。
Finally understanding that someone was pinned under my body, I fumbled in search of a foothold, but the floor my feet were searching for wasn't there.
気をつけて。今はこのバス、天井が壁だから。天井が壁？そう、床も壁。そして今まで壁だったものが今は床と天井。まあそうね。
As I repeated that word out loud in an attempt to process its meaning, further understanding of the situation flooded into my mind. This was the inside of a school bus. On the way back from our summer training camp, our bus had fallen off a cliff, with us still inside.
どうでもいいけれど、早く移動してくださらない？さっきからあなた、私の左腕を踏んでいるのだけれど。ごめんなさい。痛いわよ。不用意に動かないで。ごめんなさい。あなた、それ口癖？後で殴るときに呼び出すから名前を教えなさい。ごめんな。冗談よ。私は風見和樹。スオーです。ああ、スオーさんね。名前と容姿は知っているけど、お話しするのは初めてね。はい、はじめまして。敬語はいいわ。私も同じ1年生だし。それと、 できれば挨拶は後にしてさっさと私の上から降りてくださる？痛くて涙が出てきたわ。ごめんなさい。5回目。いい？ごめんなさいって言葉は口にすればするほど言葉の価値が下がるのよ。次にごめんなさいって言ったら怒るわよ。じゃないわよ。いいから左にどきなさい。出口はそっちよ。ごめん。舌打ちしないで謝るから。
I knew the name Kazami Kazuki. It was the name of the top incoming student, the girl who'd been chosen as our class representative to deliver the greeting speech at our entrance ceremony this spring. Kazuki sounded like a boy's name, and the girl herself appeared somewhat absent-minded, always walking around with a sleepy look on her face. And yet there was something about her that suggested the cold sharpness of a blade. We belonged to the same basketball team and participated in the training camp together. But I had shied away from the foreboding aura she projected, and in the end we hadn't spoken so much as once during the trip. The interior of the bus was scattered with debris, and every foothold was uncertain, but Kazami Kazuki quickly crawled her way through, dragged herself out a shattered window, and turned back to offer her hand to me.
ほら、手を出しなさい。ありがとう。どうやらなんとか助かったようね。はい、メガネ。あなたのでしょ？ありがとう。
The moment I replaced the glasses on my head, I drew a harsh breath at the sight of the bus we had been riding in. The roof was smashed, the windows all broken, the vehicle was completely overturned, its belly exposed. White smoke was pouring from the area of the still active engine. We need to get away fast or we'll be in danger. At this rate, that thing might explode. As that fear ran through my mind, Kazami Kazuki glanced briefly at my face with her usual sleepy expression, then snorted lightly.
大丈夫よ。こういった事故で車が爆発するのは映画の中だけだから安心しなさい。
White hair would be pretty in real life.
どうして私が煙を上げるエンジンを見ながら泣きそうな顔しているあなたを見れば子供にでもわかるわ。で、誰から助けましょうか？爆発しないと分かったあなたは次に早くみんなを助けましょうって言い出すと思ったのだけれど違った？そんなエスパーでも見るような目で私を見ないでよ。私は手早くことを進めたいだけなんだから。で、誰から助けるの？あなたに決めさせてあげる。1、先生。2、あなたの親友。3、怪我人。あなたなら誰から助ける？どうして私に決めさせるの？簡単な心理テストのようなものよ。あなたが誰から助けるかであなたがどんな女の子なのかわかると思って。風見さんだったら質問に質問を返すのはバカだと思われるからやめなさい。それとそうやって回答を保留にするのも回答とみなすわよ。状況判断能力と決断力のない子だと思われてしまうけれどそれで構わない？まあいいわ。それじゃあ私が決める。まずは部長。どうして部長から？私あの子が嫌いなのよ。さっきの質問の答えだけど私は1でも2でも3でもなく4の嫌いな子から助けるわ。4ってずるくない？回答の数を3つに限定した覚えはないけれど3つの中に正解がなかった時にどう答えるかもテストに含まれているのよ。意地悪クイズみたい。それにどうして嫌いな子から助けるの？だって 12人もいるのよ。嫌いな子が最後に残ったら絶対に面倒くさいって思うに決まっているじゃない。それが理由？そう、嫌なことはさっさと終わらせたいのよ。私って夏休みの宿題を夏休みに入る前に済ませてしまうぐらいせっかちなの。わかるような、わからないような。わからなくてもいいから、あなたもこっちに来て手伝いなさいな。ごめんなさい。
To be honest, I found it very difficult to understand her thoughts. But I did understand that the word genius was probably created to describe this sort of person. There were 14 people riding on that bus, including the team's advisor. Eventually, 11 people emerged from its wreckage, together with one small dog that belonged to a team member. The remaining 3 were dead. 2 were killed instantly when the bus fell. The other, still conscious immediately after the accident, rolled herself into a ball and moaned for 10 minutes before she died. I don't... That sounds painful. Among the 11 survivors, 4 were wounded. 1 had broken both her legs. 1 had struck her head and suffered a laceration. 1 had received a gash to her abdomen from a sharp object. And the man who should have been our guardian, the teacher who had been our team's advisor, was unconscious and showed no signs of waking. That, more than anything else, filled our hearts with gloom. None of us could get our minds around the situation we were in. Clutching our knees to our chests, we sat on the ground in a daze.
まずは怪我人の手当てをするべきだと私は思うけど、どうかしら。
But that heavy silence was soon broken. Kazami Kazuki spoke in a perfectly normal tone of voice. When I raised my head in response to her clear, firm words, I saw that she was addressing our group's official leader, the team's captain.
こんな状況だからこそ、しっかりしてください、先輩。
そうね。言われなくても分かってはいるのだけれど、こんな状況で私たちに何ができるというの？
反論しても？
どうぞ。
ただ待っていても助けが来る保証なんてどこにもないわ。あなたにこの場を仕切る能力がないのであれば、私が代わりますけど、どうしますか？
勝手なことを言わないで。もしあなたの判断ミスで現状が悪化したら、誰が責任を取ると思ってるの？
この後に及んでも責任の所在を気にする余裕はあるのね。
はあ？何ですって？よく聞こえないんだけど。
いいえ、別に何も。では、この場はお任せしても？
余計なお気遣いは結構よ。リツ、こっちにいらっしゃい。
あ、はい。なんでしょう。
あなた、ご実家はお医者様よね。
はい、そうですけど。
だったら応急処置ぐらいできるでしょ。すぐに取り掛かって。
そんな無理ですよ。いくら実家が医者だからって私にはそんな知識は。
それでも何も知らない素人よりはマシでしょ。ごちゃごちゃ言わないでやりなさい。
Ritsu wrung her hands in front of her chest. I completely understood her feelings. Taking on the role of doctor simply because of her parents' occupation, the responsibility was far too grave. It wasn't as though she had inherited their medical skills, and superficial knowledge wouldn't be enough in this situation. The team captain, Sakashita Chiaki, and Koide Ritsu, a girl who had always played the role of her devoted underling. As a mere first year, I didn't know much about their relationship, but the fact was that I'd never seen Ritsu disobey an order from the captain.
リツ、同じことを何度も言わせないで。
はい。じゃあ、まずは
何を言っているのよ。まずは先生からよ。
でも、 足を骨折して重傷ですし。
いいから先に先生を見なさい。
はい。
Kazuki watched with the disdainful eyes of a spectator to an ugly farce as Ritsu swallowed her complaints. As our doctor walked away with sagging shoulders, Kazuki approached the Hashido for the second time.
坂下部長、私に周囲の探索をする許可をいただけますか？
一人で勝手なことをしないで。どうしてあなたはいつもそうやって集団の輪を乱そうとするの？
スオさん、付き合っていただける？
ちょっと風見さん。
私一人でなければよいのでしょう。これでも私は気を利かせているのよ。あなたは私がそばにいない方が威張り散らしやすいでしょうし。それじゃ行くわよ、スオさん。
As I chased after Kazami Kazuki, I saw the captain's expression out of the corner of my eye. She was glaring at me, making no attempt to hide her displeasure. Her eyes asked, "Are you taking that woman's side?" In response, I offered a quick bow of my head. I didn't understand myself whether that gesture was an apology for siding with Kazuki, or a silent attempt to convey, "I haven't betrayed you." Either way, some instinct inside me had judged that following Kazami Kazuki was the correct decision. Although I had seen Kazuki for the first time at that entrance ceremony, I had known her name for much longer. When we were grade schoolers, it was well known that an 8-year-old child had taken a special prize at the district painting contest. As the painting had been exhibited among other children's work, that was her only award, but it might well have taken the overall prize otherwise. Our class took a trip to see her piece on display at the district assembly hall. Even with my immature eye for art, I could sense something inexpressible in words from that painting, something that nonetheless moved my heart. And my impression of that work, and the name of the genius who painted it, were deeply etched into my mind. Kazami Kazuki. She wasn't blessed with talent as a painter alone. She could do anything she tried. Anything at all. Well, that might be a bit of an exaggeration, but on her first attempts, she could usually produce adequate results. If it was a field she found particularly difficult, it might take 3 days of effort for her to reach average skill. Those were the rumors anyway. According to those who knew her, she lives in a different world, where I can't believe that she's a human being, where she can see things normal people can't. At the time, I was astonished that anyone could inspire such stories, many of which were so overblown that they took on a tinge of the awful. But when we entered the same school in the same year, even joining the same team, the girl appeared perfectly normal, if a little standoffish. Even so, I could vaguely sense that her true nature was somehow different from that of an ordinary person. To be honest, I had avoided her as a result. And now I was alone with her for the first time under these circumstances. Although I followed as instructed, I couldn't find anything to say to her, and she was equally silent. The two of us just trudged on, not exchanging a single word. The ground at our feet was rugged and hard, and rock walls loomed on both sides. When I looked straight up, there was nothing but trees and sky. We seemed to have fallen into some sort of fissure, a crack in the earth. The walls were maybe 10 meters tall at their lowest point, not so high as to rule out climbing, but on both sides the rock face slanted inward as they rose up, hanging over us. With this pronounced of an overhang, climbing with bare hands seemed impossible, and even with tools it would likely be difficult. Apparently Kazami Kazuki had been thinking along the same lines. She came to a stop a little ways ahead of me, placed her hand on one of the slanting walls of rock, and began to strike it with a stone she picked up off the ground.
口を開いたかと思えば、随分とこ に
Oh, what the? What the? What happened?
そうね。どうやって登るのとか、元の道には戻れないとか、これからどうするのとか、いろいろあるけど、一番聞きたいのは多分、
Yeah, I don't know what
どう
happened.
して私に声をかけたのじゃないかしら。
No.
踊り。だったらはっきりと答えてあげる。それはあなたが強く言われると断れないタイプだからよ。
Okay, here it is. Wait, that's what she said?
あなたの場合、一緒に来てくれないとお願いされたら悩むけど、来いと命令されたら悩まずに。どうしてそう思うの？さっきの心理テストの結果からそう思ったのだけれど、違った？
Yes, she was probably right. When my mother asked me, what should we have for our snack today, I would answer, what do you want, Mommy? When she simply told me we're having cakes today, I was relieved because I wouldn't have to choose. Given multiple choices, I would waver indecisively, and when given a single path, I would follow it obediently. That was just my personality.
余計なことを喋ると今度は何を読み取られるか分かったもんじゃないって顔してるわよ。私としてはあまり警戒しないでほしいのだけれど。
As she spoke, Kazami Kazuki removed her cell phone from her pocket and looked into the screen.
あ、やっぱり県外ね。あなたのはどう？
I hurriedly pulled my phone out of my school uniform, but as expected, its screen was also displaying the words, no signal.
ダメみたい。私のも県外でしょうね。
Kazuki turned off her cell phone immediately and slid it back into her pocket. Her phone.
あなたも電源を切っておいた方がいいわよ。電波状況が良くないままだとびっくりするぐらいバッテリーの消耗が激しいから。
It wasn't as discouraging as I would have expected to find our cell phones were useless. To tell the truth, I checked mine soon after escaping the bus. Of course, the screen had also displayed no signal then. Finding that was still the case prompted a little more than a feeling of resignation. Well, expected as much. We were within a long tunnel-like crevice, maybe if we just kept following it, partially because of wishful thinking like that. I wasn't in a state of despair at our situation. Another factor was the strange sense of security that came from being near this girl named Kazami Kazuki, as though I'd found firm, reliable ground to stand on. If I'm with this girl, it'll work out somehow. Her strangely powerful presence let me think such irresponsible thoughts somewhere deep down.
状況はあまり芳しくないわね。
There was a heavily overgrown jungle visible in the direction Kazuki was pointing. It was a dense forest, seemingly devoid of animal life, that seemed to actively refuse human entry. The thick wall of vibrant green almost seemed pleasant at a glance. And yet it was obvious that a single step inside would find you in an environment far too harsh to support human life. Even if you were to advance by hacking through the thick grasses and bushes rising over your head, the distance you could advance in one day would be pretty limited. And in avoiding the tall trees that grew close enough together as to block out the light of day, you quickly lose any grasp of your own position anyway.
「運が良ければ人の立ち入った痕跡のようなものを発見できるかと思ったのだけれど、これは期待するだけ無駄だったようね。
If there's even one path a human traveled, follow it and you'll find a place where humans live. But the jungle in front of us showed no signs of such intrusion. Even so, I had some hope that we might stand a chance by pushing our way boldly through the woods, but that thought was shattered by what Kazami Kazuki told me next.
これを見てごらんなさい。
She held out a compass we had used at the training camp for orienteering, one of our recreational activities. The needle that should have always sought north was pointing to the northwest, and when she turned to face a different direction, it didn't move within the compass.
どういうこと？まあ簡単に言ってしまえば、針が動いていない、方位自身として機能していないという。そんな、どうして？おそらくはデビエーションね。周りの壁を見てごらんなさい。壁？
As I looked up in confusion at the rock face looming above us, she picked up a stone lying at her feet, and it again struck the wall sharply. The sound it produced was a high-pitched clinking, like what you might expect from a hard metal surface.
岩壁の一部がガラス化しているわ。おそらく瞬間的な高温にさらされた状態から急激に冷やされてアモルファス化したのね。ごめん、専門的すぎて意味がわからない。火山の溶岩が冷えても似たような状況になるけど、あまりにも広範囲だし、かといってエアバーストにしては規模が小さすぎるし、多分隕石かな。隕石？隕石ってあの隕石？マイクロブラックホールが激突したって可能性はまずないでしょうし、おそらく小規模な隕石が地表に到達する前に爆発して、その飛散した破片の中でも大きめのものがこの周辺に落ちたんじゃないかしら。方位磁石が機能しないのもそれが原因？多分ね。飛散した破片に重鉱物が含まれていて、マスコンセントレーション的なスポットをいくつも発生させているんじゃないかしら。そう考えるとこの不自然な環境にも納得がいくのよね。あなたはどうって言われても。
If Kazami Kazuki thought so, it was probably the truth. At the very least, I wasn't about to come up with any other possibilities.
さてさて、周囲は草も生えない岩場。周りを囲む壁は構造的に這い上がるのは不可能。進める先は人を拒絶するような密林。携帯も通じないし、方位磁石すら機能しない。申し分のない遭難ね。面白くなってきたわ。面白くなってきたって。不謹慎に聞こえたのなら謝るわ。でも私の言葉から余裕が感じられた方が、あなたも余計な不安を感じないで済むかと思って。お気遣いは感謝するけど、他の子の前ではそういう言い回しは避けた方がいいと思う。そうね。
Although she nodded, I didn't feel that she was convinced by my words. Precisely because we were in such a bad situation, a confident leader who could pull off this sort of all-knowing God act would be ideal. But she wasn't the leader of our group. By rank, our teacher was first, the team captain Sakashita was second, and the vice captain Okabe was third, or should have been. But unfortunately, Okabe-senpai had died when the bus fell. Still, a first year of Kazuki had very little say in the team's decisions.
坂下部長、私に命令権を譲ってくれないかしら。その方がいちいち愚信をする手間が省略できて効率がいいと思うのだけれど。ねえ、聞いてもいい？何かしら？その坂下部長のことなんだけど。聞きにくいようなこと？そうじゃなくて、もしかして私が今か。は？何？突然。あなた、私のことを神様か何か。ほら、さっき私に心理テスト。ああ、その話？つまり坂下部長が先生を一番最初に見なさいと言い出したから、心理テスト的に それがどんな結果になったのか気になるのね。そう。言われなくてもあなたにもなんとなく分かっているでしょ。坂下部長は他者依存の強いタイプよ。いつも自分が中心にいないと気が済まないくせに、自分に責任がかかるような決断を迫られた時にはすぐに背後を振り返って助けを求める人。つまりここは私が指揮を取ります、それでよろしいですね先生って言いたいから、まずは先生。わかる？なるほど。別にそれが悪いとは言わないわよ。学生なんだし、むしろそれが当たり前よね。でも彼女の場合、おそらく学校から出てもあの調子なんでしょうね。家では父親を背後に立たせているんじゃないかしら。そういう子供っぽい優越がすごく鼻につくわ。ごめんなさい。くだらない話を聞かせてしまったわね。
As Kazami Kazuki apologized for babbling, her expression was a cheerful one, appropriate for her age. But that bright smile was frightening under the circumstances. I felt sure of it. This person was attached to nothing. She grabbed hold of anything she thought she needed, and she cast aside anything that outlived its necessity. Maybe that was just another part of being a genius. As these thoughts ran through my head, Kazuki suddenly turned her back to me and mumbled a few words.
そうでもないわよ。
At that brief sentence, I felt a chill like cold fingers running down my spine.
何が？そろそろ戻りましょう。私たちだけで逃げ出したと思われても心外だし。
If you compare the human brain to an engine, Kazuki's must have been operating at a far higher RPM than ours. She was constantly maintaining a speed of rotation that would quickly cause a normal person to overheat. I looked down at Kazuki's feet as she walked a few paces ahead of me. She was wearing the standard white sneakers specified by our school. Since the girl cast a shadow and didn't appear to be floating, apparently she wasn't a ghost or other supernatural apparition.
What is wrong? ごめんなさい。あなたが今何を考えているのか想像したらおかしくって。でしょうね。気を悪くしないでね。一応言っておくけど、私は幽霊じゃないし、あなたの夢に出てきた神様でもないわよ。ああ、その発想はなかったわ。ん？どの発想？あなたがお化けじゃないかとは思ったけど、逆に私が死にかけていて都合のいい夢を見ているとは考えもしなかった。私が言わなくても10分後には考えていたはずよ。変な子。そうね。1歳半の頃、母親にもそう言われたわ。覚えてるの？冗談よ。どこからが？どこからでも、お好きなところからどうぞ。
I was actually understanding her less the longer we talked. The one thing I did understand was that Kazami Kazuki's jokes aren't funny in the slightest.
一言で言えば絶望的な環境ね。
Having returned to the site of the accident, Kazuki and I explained the situation to Captain Sakashita, showing her the compass and its non-functional needle. She didn't stir from the rock she had been sitting on. When we finished our story, she sighed deeply, leaned forward to take her hand in her hands, and answered with a brief, "I understand." Arigato.
それで、怪我人の方は？
The captain's only response was to sluggishly raise one hand and point in the direction she indicated, Koide Ritsu was examining the wounded while trying to hold back her tears.
どうなの小出さん。
先生には大きな外傷もないし、軽い脳震盪だと思うから、しばらく横になっていれば意識が回復すると思う。広岡さんは左のすねと右の膝を骨折してる。飛び出してはいないけど、両方とも完全骨折。意識はしっかりしてるけど、桜井さんは腹部裂傷。事故の拍子で何か尖ったもの、傷跡から想像すると多分割れた瓶だと思うけど、お腹に突き刺さったみたい。金田さんは頭部裂傷、右目の上あたりの額を切ってる。多分何かにぶつけたんだと思う。もう出血は止まってるわ。
それで？
それでって。
本当に見ただけ？治療はしていないの？
無理を言わないで。道具も何もないのに。道具があったところで私には無理よ。
折れていたら位置を合わせて固定するだけ。避けていたら縫い合わせるだけじゃない。
そんなのやったこともないのに無理よ。簡単だって言うならあなたがやってよ。
じゃあお湯を沸かしてくださる？キャンプの道具の中にガスコンロがあったでしょ。たくさんお湯を沸かして生食を作ってください。ついでに救急箱と釣り道具も発掘してきてくださるとありがたいですね。
はい、わかりました。
風見さん、骨折の治療とか経験があるの？ないわ。本で読んだ知識があるだけ。あなたは？
ない。
まあ普通はないわよね。
大丈夫なの？
経験や自信のある人がいるなら変わるわよ。私だって後から来て人の仕事を奪った出しゃばりな女だと思われたら心外だもの。
Kazuki turned around quickly to face the depressed group of girls, raising her right hand, and asked, "Does anyone have medical experience?" No one raised their hand in response. No one even met Kazuki's eyes.
誰も経験がないのなら誰がやっても同じじゃない？それともこのまま怪我は自己責任ってことで放っておく？
それはさすがに。
私ね、できることはあったのにっていう後悔が一番悔しいと思うの。そんなわけだから一人ずつ見ていきましょうか。
金田さんが切る？
ああ、金田さんが一番軽傷だからよ。軽傷の子を見ている間に重傷の子が死ねば無駄な診察をしないで済むでしょ。嫌だわ。なぜ黙るの？冗談を言ったのだから笑ってくれないと恥ずかしいじゃない。
笑えないし。ねえ、あなた友達っているの？
そうね、今のところあなただけかしら。だからなぜ黙るの？
笑えばいいの？
そうね。そしたら私は泣くわ。
ごめん、会話の速度についていけない。
Following Kazuki's instructions, everyone with the physical energy and willpower to move cooperated to retrieve the first aid kit, camping equipment, and fishing tackle from the overturned bus. Kazuki gathered the tools she thought would be useful, passed them to Koide Ritsu to be disinfected, and began examining the wounded while waiting for the water to come to a boil. As promised, she looked at Grisaia and her head laceration first.
どう？耳はちゃんと聞こえていますか？右と左で聞こえ方が違うとかは？
大丈夫みたい。
じゃあ手を出して。まずは右手。
Kaneda's wound had already been disinfected, sutured shut, and covered with a roll of bandage. When Kazuki said she planned to use a fishing hook to stitch up the cut, I couldn't help raising doubts about whether such a procedure could be hygienic, but when she responded, "Oh, I suppose we could try sticking it together with super glue. I'm sure that would make for a much prettier result," I decided I should probably keep my mouth shut. After that, I did nothing but silently record Kazuki's words in the memo pad we were using as a makeshift medical record.
どう？痛い？
Kazuki took a firm grip on Kaneda's right hand and took her nails firmly into her index finger.
痛いってば。
あ、ごめんなさい。それじゃあ左手は？同じように痛みを感じる？
だから痛いってば。
It almost seemed like Kazuki was enjoying watching Kaneda squirm in pain. A question leaked out of my mouth.
ねえ、さっきから何をしているの？彼女、頭を打ったみたいだから、感覚器官や神経で左右に差異がないか調べているのよ。傷口を縫っている時に気がついたのだけれど、彼女、左目がわずかに内斜視なのよ。右目と左目で見えている範囲も違うの。気がつかなかった。
I hurriedly add the word esotropic to the record in the notebook.
あなた、お名前、なんておっしゃる？
金田サーヤ。
ああ、そうそう。金田サーヤ。サーヤさんね。いい名前だ。
そう思う？
ええ。もし私が犬を飼っていたら、そう名付けたいぐらいよ。
犬。
ごめんなさい。この人、冗談がきついから。あら、どうしてあなたが謝るの？それは、私があなたのお友達だから。あら、嬉しい。私、親友って初めてよ。
I didn't remember adding best to that phrase, but leaving that unsaid was probably the smart move here. Well, I'd learned that much, so I must have been growing used to her. I guess the word friend I had spoken just now wasn't entirely sarcastic.
今すぐあなたを抱きしめてキスをしたいところだけれど、今は金田さんの診察中だから、後でね。ごゆっくりどうぞ。どこまで見たかしら。ああ、そうそう。金田さん、あなた子供
ないわ。
母親に床に落とされたことも？
ない。
だったら斜視は今回の事故が原因ね。大丈夫、治るらしいから。はい、次の方。
Kazuki continued her examinations along these lines, eventually working her way through all of the girls, even those with no apparent injury. 今の子で最後ね。軽い内身で内出血してる子もいたけど、ほとんどが軽傷ね。
一番の重傷はやっぱり広岡さんね。左肩への脛骨と腓骨が切損、右足は大腿骨の遠位骨が複合骨折、両方とも閉鎖骨折だから細菌感染の心配はないし、一応骨は固定してみたけど、病院に連れて行かないとダメね。あとは桜井さんのお腹も。ああ、傷口が大きいから重傷に見えるけど、内臓には届いていないし、縫合は済ませたから大丈夫よ。ただ感染症が心配ね。できれば病院で抗生物質を投与した方がいいわ。とりあえずやれるだけのことはやったと部長に報告しておいて。私が報告するの？当たり前でしょ。そのためにあなたをお医者さんごっこに付き合わせたのだから。同じ言葉で状況を説明しても、誰の口から出たかで印象は変わるでしょ。きっと私の報告なんか信じないわよ、あの部長。
Well, the last thing we needed was Kazuki's harsh tongue setting off a fight.
部長には先生には部長から説明してくださいって言っておいて。その程度の手柄は与えておかないと拗ねられても面倒なだけだし。またそうやって余計なことを言う。これでも随分と遠慮しているつもりなのだけれど。風見さん。
At that moment, I realized something for the first time. Kazuki's face was flushed red, her breathing was rough, and she was sweating heavily.
どうしたの？なんだか顔色が悪いけど。これよ。
Kazuki raised her left arm as she spoke, revealing it to be heavy, swollen, and purple.
ちょっとこれどうしたの？折れてはいないようだけど、ひびは入っているみたい。いわゆる不全骨折というやつね。その左腕ってまさかバスの中で私が踏んでいた場所？事故の直前にとっさにシートベルトを腕に巻きつけて衝撃に備えたせいよ。ただでさえ負荷がかかっているところにあなたに踏んづけられてとどめを刺したのだとしても、そもそもあなたのせいで事故が起きたわけではないでしょ。それはそうだけど、でも私があなたを下敷きにしてしまった。気にしすぎよ。それとも、もし私があなたのせいだとわめき散らしたら、あなたは自分の腕を切り落として私にくれるの？ごめんなさい。それは無理。だったら気にしないことね。私も気にしていないわ。落ち込まないでよ。本当に気にしていないから。どうしよう。もう少し優しく言った方が。大丈夫なの？痛いわよ。でも泣くほどではないし、泣いて痛みを紛らわせるほど子供でもないわ。ごめんなさい。あなた、自分を罰してくれる人がいないと落ち着かないタイプ？まあいいわ。だったらこの左腕のことは貸しにしておいてあげる。貸し？そう。叱る時に望まれれば、あなたは私の命令を拒否できない。それで許してあげる。今言ってくれればすぐに従うのに。嫌よ。いい？貸しっていうのはね、返してもらわない方が大きな利益を生むのよ。覚えておきなさい。心配しないでいいのよ。私も別にお友達から高い利子を巻き上げようとは思わないから。
Kazuki's expression as she spoke those words was an artificially perfect smile, suggesting a kind of maturity well beyond her years. As I watched her face, I felt sticky sweat seeping out of the back of my head. Did I really just put myself at the mercy of a person like this? Our basketball team's advisor, Mr. Ochi Yoshiko, regained consciousness 30 minutes later. After hearing a brief summary of the situation from Captain Sakashita, Mr. Ochi called for all the surviving students and had us sit on the ground together.
そもそも事故の原因は何だったのですか？
Just as if we were still in the classroom, Captain Sakashita raised her right hand as she spoke. At her nearly accusatory tone, our young teacher and the driver of the bus wrinkled his face into something very close to a scowl.
わからん。急にハンドルが取られて、慌ててブレーキをかけたが止まりきれずにそのまま崖下に転落した。おそらくはパンクだろう。
では、パンクの原因は何ですか？
俺が知るわけないだろう。俺は今目が覚めたばかりなんだぞ。
大きな声を出さないでください。みんな不安なんです。先生がそんなことでは。
わかっている。
A worthless argument along these lines continued for a good 10 minutes. The situation being what it was, nobody tried to butt in or calm things down. We all sat there and waited for things to run their course. Watching our teacher and Captain bellow at each other meaninglessly, a few girls began to cry from sheer anxiety. The captain sneezed on that fact as a new line of attack. In that place filled with gloom and dominated by angry voices, Kazami Kazuki smiled brightly, drew her face close, and began to whisper in my ear.
やあね。どんな時でも自分以外の責任が確立しないと落ち着かないのかしら。今は原因や責任の所在より話し合うべき重要なことがもっとたくさんあると思わない？
True enough, but I couldn't understand what she expected to accomplish by murmuring this to me. It wasn't like I had the ability to redirect the discussion. Complaining wasn't going to get us anywhere. If anything, there was a good chance this might make the situation even worse.
そここそこそと何を話しているの？
See, I told you so. When you get spotted griping in the shadows, of course you're going to get told off. As I hesitated, searching for some kind of excuse, Kazuki abruptly raised her right hand and asked for permission to speak.
パンクの原因ですが、おそらくは廃材を積んだトラックの荷台から何か鋭利な金属片のようなものが落ちて、それを私たちのマイクロバスの前輪が踏んだのだと思います。
根拠はあるの？
バスのタイヤを見てください。
As directed by Kazuki's words, everyone present turned to look at the tires of the overturned bus. The front wheel on the right side was neatly torn around, its circumference cracked into two vertical halves.
そう。例えば尖った金属の板のようなものを踏んでしまい、そのまま車体のどこかに引っかかって回転するタイヤを連続で傷つけ続けた結果、最後にタイヤが破裂したのではないかと。
Watching Kazuki explain her theory with words and gestures, the majority of us felt the pieces falling into place. It made sense.
今時の車のタイヤは釘を踏んだ程度なら一瞬で空気が抜けてしまうことはないそうですが、金属片でタイヤを裂かれてしまえばどうしようもないわ。また、そんなものを踏んづけた先生が悪いわけでもない。たとえタイヤが裂けてパンクしても、直線道路であったら安全に止まることはできたはず。あえて何が悪かったのかというのを決めるのであれば、カーブの途中でタイヤが破裂したという運のなさが一番悪いわ。そんな悪運の中にあって、ここにいる私たちは少なくとも命だけは助かった。今はその幸運をどう大切にするかというのが大切じゃないかしら。
こんな状況で私たちに何ができると？
絶望しないための努力なんてどうかしら。つまり前向きな希望探しの話し合いなんて素敵じゃないかと私は思うのだけれど。
Rather than grieving over your poverty, fantasize about what you'll buy if you win the lottery. You'll sleep better at night. That was Kazuki's argument in a nutshell, although if she said it outright, it was obvious she would have angered the captain. And so, at Kazuki's request, I took my notebook in one hand and repeated the details of our situation to the group. We were surrounded by a dense sea of trees without so much as an animal trail running through it. The cliffs hung over us like an overturned mortar bowl, making a climb back to the road impossible. And our cell phones couldn't find a signal. To escape alive, our only option was to walk away from the road and into the forest, but probably because of a meteorite that fell nearby, there seemed to be dense deposits of metal scattered throughout the area. And thanks to these pockets of concentrated magnetic material, our compasses would be of no use. It seemed plausible that this strange hole with its overhanging walls had been gouged into the earth by the impact of that meteorite. The bare rock of the walls had turned to glass under the assault of momentarily high temperature. Momentary high temperature. Even reading out this dry, factual summary of our situation from the notebook was enough to drain my spirits. Where exactly were we supposed to find hope in any of this?
こうなってしまえば下手に動き回っていたずらに体力を消耗するよりおとなしく救助を待った方がいいわね。
はい、それが最善かと。
Although I wanted to escape this disturbing place as quickly as possible, there was no guarantee that any of us would return alive if we wandered off aimlessly now. Continuing the investigation of our surroundings until a more certain path presented itself, while waiting for the arrival of the rescue, seemed a wiser choice by far. I felt a wave of relief wash through my body at the captain's decision.
あら、それはどうかしら。
I looked behind me with a start. Kazami Kazuki, the very person who shoved me onto this little stage, had spoken those words. Kazuki, the very person who had told me to explain things clearly and logically, so no one acts rashly, had disrupted the discussion just as we were beginning to reach a consensus. I couldn't begin to understand why. I glanced at her face with an irrepressible frown.
どういう意味かしら。何か反論でも？
ええ、確かに下手に動き回ったところで生還できるという保証はどこにもない。けど待っていれば助けが来るという保証もどこにもありません。
それぐらい私にも分かっているわ。一生ここで助けを待つつもりはないけれど、十分な調査もしないまま密林に踏み込むのは自殺行為だとは思わなくて？
十分な調査とは何をもって十分と判断するのですか？食料どころか飲み水すら潤沢ではないこの状況で腰を据えて考えている余裕があるとは思えません。それならいっそ気力と体力が充実している今のうちに腰を上げるべきかと愚行しますが。
それは本当に愚行よね。私たちのような素人が考えるほど山は甘くないわ。私の判断が気に入らないのならどうぞあなたを一人で森に入られて結構よ。
口が過ぎたようです。申し訳ありません。
分かればいいのよ。
If it was unexpected to hear Kazuki raise an objection in the first place, it was just as surprising to see her withdraw her opinion so easily. Still holding my silence, I asked Kazuki a question with my gaze. What was that all about? In response to my glance, Kazuki returned her own wordless answer with the movement of her eyes and a jerk of her chin. Don't worry about it. Keep going.
それでは次に私たちがするべきはベース横転したバスから使えそうな道具を持ち出す作業に取り掛かるというのはどうでしょう。
そうね、そうしましょう。では手分けをして作業に取り掛かります。それでよろしいですね、先生。
ああ、そうしよう。
A very scary situation to be in. Bye.